Hey, so first I want to thank my committee and those joining me today. I appreciate the support and encouragement, especially these last few months, so I could reach this day. The topic of my dissertation is digital text in primary grades, examining reading instruction, usage, and teacher perceptions. I started to discover that this was the topic that needed and I wanted to explore in the fall of 2020 as I was taking language learning in the brain class with Dr. Molly Dunn. And as part of the class, I read the 2018 published book, Reader Come Home, The Reading Brain in a Digital World by Dr. Marianne Wolf. And her brain research on how we processed digital and print text differently led her to make the recommendation that we do not use digital text during the early years of school for reading acquisition and as part of reading instruction. And I was at that time in fall of 2020, I was one of millions of teachers and reading specialists who were sharing digital text because that we didn't have a choice because we were teaching virtually. But as we slowly started coming back to in-person learning, I was observing and thinking so much about what I had read and learned. And I was thinking about this quite a bit. And my personal observations were that we were using it a lot more commonly in classrooms. And I kept thinking about these young reading brains and how our reading instruction, is it changing? How should it be changing? So I really wanted to get to the heart of how this reading material impacted such an enormously important thing early educators do with literacy development. I found a gap in the research as there is limited research on early educators' use of digital text, especially in reading instruction. My research purpose was to explore the frequency of instructional use and perceived effectiveness of digital text in kindergarten to third grade classrooms. As my research developed, I added exploration of teacher-student interaction while students are reading digital text. Teaching children to read by the end of third grade remains one of the primary educator's most critical and complex responsibilities, as early literacy proficiency is a strong predictor of long-term academic and life success. Literacy instruction in K through 3 classrooms has historically centered on print-based texts, with extensive research documenting best practices for print instruction. However, the educational landscape has shifted with the increasing availability and use of digital text in early elementary classrooms. Despite their growing presence, limited research exists on digital text instructional use and pedagogical implications in primary literacy instruction. Educators must contend with a new literacy environment as digital resources such as Epic Books and Sora become more prevalent and students engage with screens more frequently in and out of school. The shift is particularly consequential given evidence that digital reading often alters cognitive engagement. Unlike print, digital texts may increase passive reading behaviors and reduce comprehension due to distractions and continuous partial attention. While digital tools offer benefits such as accessibility, interactivity, and increased student motivation, they also introduce instructional challenges that have not been fully addressed in research on early literacy. The COVID-19 pandemic further accelerated digital text exposure, magnifying the need to understand how digital tools influence reading acquisition. However, the current research base has yet to examine systematically how teachers differentiate instruction across print and digital mediums, or how digital literacy practices support or hinder young readers' development. By examining current practices, my goal was to have this study to help identify professional development needs and support more effective use of digital text in primary literacy instruction. In my theoretical framework, I explored the literacy and learning theories of Vygotsky's social cultural learning theory, Clay's emergent literacy theory, Piaget's cognitive development theory, and Freest's theory of reading acquisition, all of which emphasize the developmental nature of learning and the importance of interaction in the learning process. They share a focus on how children acquire knowledge and literacy skills gradually through stages or phases with the support of social and environmental factors. The central theme among these theories is the role of scaffolding and guided support in learning, where adults or more knowledgeable peers assist children in reaching higher levels of understanding. Collectively, these theories emphasize that literacy development is a dynamic process influenced by cognitive growth, social interaction, and prior knowledge. So this was brought me to my 4 research questions, which are: to what extent and with what frequency is digital text used in primary grade classrooms? How do primary teachers use digital text within reading instruction? What are teachers' perceptions of digital text as effective instructional materials? And how do teachers interact with students when they read digital text? I also had sub-questions. Sub-questions were asked on the impacts of teachers' age, years of experience, and grade level taught with digital text use. The literature review had 4 key areas of focus: reading acquisition or development and understanding how students develop as readers, including the development of the reading brain, the use of essential foundational skills such as oral language, phonemic awareness, and phonics, as well as the research behind the importance of reading by the age of 9. The literature review examined reading instructional practices in K through 3, including evidence-based techniques such as teaching for transfer, effective instructional materials, and dialogic reading, as well as explicit reading instruction, including the gradual release of responsibility, text selection, and skill development, and the importance of teacher feedback and responsive teaching. With the integration and impact of digital text in reading instruction, the literature review examined the difference between print and digital reading mediums, instruction with digital text and the reading brain, and how digital text impacts reading development. For digital text in reading instruction, advantages and disadvantages were examined, including interaction with adults and instructional implications. For my methodology, I had a quantitative study with cross-sectional survey data. My sample size was 186 kindergarten through 3rd grade classroom teachers across the United States. The data collection was a survey through SurveyMonkey of multiple choice questions, Likert scale items, and one open-ended response question, which was, what is the main reason you use digital text in the reading classroom? My data analysis, I used descriptive statistics and Spearman-Rowe correlation. And interesting to point out, of my 186 teachers that took my survey, I had equal distribution of the grade levels K through 3, with about 25% from each of the 4 grade levels. So that worked out really well. The key findings that emerged from the data analysis were that digital text is used frequently in K through 3rd grade classrooms. Digital text's main instructional use is for student independent reading. Teacher and student interaction decreases when a student is reading digital text. And demographic variables such as teacher's age, years of experience, and grade taught showed no significant impact with the use of digital text. The findings from research question 1 reveal that digital text is a regular component of reading instruction and independent reading in many K through 3 classrooms. Most teachers reported using digital text at least a few times a week at 43%, and nearly 1 in every 5 teachers, 20%, incorporating digital text daily. Researchers note that the rise in digital text use is closely linked to broader educational goals. For example, digital texts are often selected because they provide flexible access to diverse reading materials, support student engagement, and enable differentiated instruction. The results of this study aligned this body of research, as the main reasons for using digital text cited by a majority of study participants were supporting diverse learners across access to texts and student engagement. These findings suggest that teachers' frequent use of digital text is not incidental, but part of a more significant shift towards integrating digital tools into reading instruction. The alignment of current instructional practices, as well as the result of the survey's open-ended question with the literature, demonstrate that digital text is not only increasingly prevalent in primary classrooms, but is also valued for its instructional flexibility and role in preparing students for a digitally connected world. The findings for research question 2 reveal that although teachers use digital text in various ways within early literacy instruction, the most common use is independent reading, with 82.3% of participants. saying that they use it for independent reading. The literature supported the growing presence of digital texts in K through 3 classrooms for reading practice, reflecting how these texts are increasingly used to provide flexible access to reading materials and to support differentiated learning experiences for diverse learners. Also, in agreement with the literature, the study found that elementary teachers primarily use digital text for independent reading and research activities, but less frequently for explicit instruction in foundational skills. Since independent reading was the most frequently reported use of digital text in the study, it was important to consider which features teachers perceive as the most and least effective with this instructional context. The literature highlights several advantages teachers associate with digital text, including audio narration, text-to-speech features, interactive elements, and their engaging and motivating nature for young learners. Findings from this study align closely with these perspectives, as teachers most frequently identified these same features, particularly audio supports and interactivity, as effective tools for supporting emergent and struggling readers. Participants emphasized how these elements aid differentiation, improve accessibility, and enhance student engagement, reinforcing the instructional value of digital text when implemented with intentionality. This study found that teacher-student interaction during digital text use is often limited, with most teachers reporting less engagement than when students read print texts. 1/3 of teachers said they don't consistently interact with students at all when using digital text. When interaction did occur, it was most often limited to comprehension-focused questions rather than dialogic exchanges or instructional scaffolding. The cognitive demands and multimedia features inherent in digital text may also shift the instructional focus away from sustained oral language interaction and towards more surface-level comprehension monitoring. This dynamic potentially undermines one of the foundational components of early literacy instruction, the active, responsive dialogue between teacher and student that supports meaning-making and language development. These results highlight the tension between the educational promise of digital texts and the practical realities of their use in early childhood classrooms. This concern is especially critical for emergent and early readers for whom literacy acquisition relies heavily on instructional mediation, frequent feedback, and rich oral language exposure. The observed reduction in teacher-student interaction during digital reading reflects broader concerns about passive engagement, attention fragmentation, and reduced scaffolding in technology-mediated learning environments. If digital tools are to be leveraged effectively for literacy instruction, intentional efforts must be made to preserve the interactive and dialogic elements that are essential for early reading development. Sub-questions 1, 2, 4, and 5 investigated whether teacher demographics, specifically age, years of teaching experience, and the grade level taught, influence how digital texts are used in reading instruction, including frequency of use, instructional application, perceived effectiveness, and teacher-student interaction. While most demographic variables showed no significant impact, the grade level taught emerged as a modest but consistent factor influencing how digital texts were used. Despite some variation in instructional use by grade, the perceived effectiveness of digital text was broadly consistent across all demographic groups. The dissonance between frequent use and moderate ratings of effectiveness suggests that some teachers may regularly use digital text while simultaneously harboring doubts about their pedagogical value. This highlights the importance of addressing not just access and training, but also fostering critical dialogue around instructional purpose and best practices for digital text use. The findings of this study have significant implications for both K through 3 classroom teachers and the broader group of professional development providers, including literacy specialists, school administrators, and higher education faculty. As digital texts become increasingly embedded in early literacy instruction, it is no longer sufficient for educators to focus solely on access and basic use. Instead, the shift calls for strategic pedagogical adaptations that align with the developmental needs of young readers. Digital texts bring new opportunities and challenges for instruction, requiring thoughtful scaffolding, sustained teacher-student interaction, and intentional use of digital affordances to enhance comprehension and engagement. These changes must be reflected not only in classroom practice, but also in the professional learning systems that support teachers' instructional growth. For K through third grade classroom teachers, the study's findings affirm the importance of pedagogical intentionality when using digital texts. While digital resources are widely adopted, many teachers report less interactive or responsive instructional practices when compared to print-based reading. To counter this, teachers must implement evidence-based strategies that encourage active reading behaviors, such as questioning for comprehension, modeling metacognitive reflection, and guiding students through the structure and functionality of digital platforms. Effective instruction in digital environments also requires modeling appropriate navigation and focus, as well as designing opportunities for annotation, reflection, and comparison across print and digital mediums. Without this level of support, young readers, many of whom are still developing foundational decoding and self-regulation skills, may struggle to access the full benefits of digital text. Professional development providers must respond by designing training experiences that emphasize both pedagogical depth and technological fluency. This includes moving beyond surface level or tool-based instruction to provide sustained job-embedded opportunities for teachers to learn, implement, and reflect on evidence-based practice within digital contexts. The findings also point to the need for inclusive, experience-neutral professional learning models. Since teacher demographics such as age or years of experience were not significantly related to digital text use, professional development must be responsive to a broad range of educator needs and focus on shared instructional goals. Literacy specialists can support this work by helping teachers align digital text use with developmentally appropriate reading strategies, while administrators play a key role in building school cultures that prioritize equitable access, collaboration, and innovation in literacy instruction. Finally, faculty and teacher preparation programs hold a critical responsibility in shaping future educators' ability to use digital text effectively. The study reinforces that pre-service training experiences heavily influence their perceptions and instructional behaviors. By embedding digital literacy pedagogy within coursework and field experiences, higher education faculty can ensure that new teachers are equipped to meet the demands of 21st century classrooms. The growing prevalence of digital text in early literacy instruction underscores the need for continued research to explore its multifaceted impact on teaching and learning. Future investigations should prioritize examining how digital texts affect the specific student literacy outcomes, such as comprehension, vocabulary acquisition, and reading fluency. Experimental and longitudinal research designs are particularly valuable in evaluating whether early exposure to digital texts fosters sustained reading growth or presents long-term challenges. Additionally, research should investigate how young readers cognitively and behaviorally engage with digital text, using tools such as eye tracking, screen capture analysis, and digital annotation to better understand how digital reading environments shape attention and comprehension processes. Another critical direction for future research is the exploration of instructional strategies that foster teacher-student interaction during digital reading. While digital texts are widely used, they are often implemented in ways that limit scaffolded instructional support. Observational studies are needed to examine how teachers engage students in meaning making when using digital text, including techniques like think alouds, digital conferencing, and comprehension questions tailored to screen-based formats. As digital texts continue to reshape literacy instruction, I hope the study provides a foundation for ongoing inquiry and innovation. Future research and professional learning must build on these findings to ensure that digital reading enhances rather than diminishes the interactive, responsive, and high-impact practices essential to early reading success.